The wind had teeth that day. It howled low through the hollows and gnawed at the edges of her shawl, picking at the threads like it knew how little was left of her. Dust curled around her feet like smoke, the land stretching out before her in ripples of rust and bone, endless and merciless. Somewhere behind her, a buzzard wheeled. She didn't look back. Clara was already dying, though her heart had not yet stopped. Her mouth tasted of copper and grit. The sun peeled layers from her skin without apology, and the swell of her ankle, twisted wrong beneath her weight, had begun to pulse with a heat that felt angry, alive, like it wanted to argue with her for surviving this long. She had not screamed when Eli left her. Not once. It was not that she lacked the strength, or that pain hadn't carved her raw, cried deep into her chest. But she'd known, somewhere past the shock, past the wild fluttering in her throat like a sparrow trapped in a bell jar, that no one would hear. And he would only enjoy it. His spurs had chimed as he turned back to the saddle. His words had been simple, even kind in tone. "You understand, don't you, Clara? You always were a weight I couldn't carry." And then he was gone. No backward glance. Just the sound of his horse growing smaller in the silence. Now she walked, or tried to. Half-dragged, half-staggered across the salt-cracked earth. One hand pressed to her ribs where the fall had bruised them purple. The other clutched the leather strap of the canteen he'd left, half-empty, maybe even poisoned. A mercy, perhaps. She hadn't yet decided. She remembered, vaguely, how this all began. Not just the moment he struck her or the sick lurch of the mule when he kicked her off its back. But before. The little things. The erosion of love. Eli had not always been cruel. When he courted her, he was full of golden talk, big plans, sharp boots, and promises that glittered like fool's gold. She was a preacher's daughter, unused to men with calloused hands and dangerous eyes. But he had smiled the way firelight flickers, warm and hungry all at once. And she, a girl desperate to be seen for more than her hymns and hemstitching, had mistaken danger for passion. He called her Little Dove back then, said she made the world seem quieter. And that might have been true, at first. But as the trail grew harder and the debts heavier, he began to hear her silence as insult. She could still recall the first slap, more shock than pain. He apologized with wildflowers, said she didn't understand the pressure he was under. By the time they reached the Arizona territory, he barely bothered to hide his contempt. Her quiet strength, once admired, had become something he resented. It made him feel small. Men like Eli could never forgive a woman for surviving what they could not. Clara's vision blurred. The light hurt now, not just her eyes, but her soul. The landscape shimmered like a fever dream, broken only by the occasional scraggly mesquite or the sudden scream of a hawk overhead. Her boots were split at the seams, toes blistered and bleeding. The hem of her dress was torn, the pale blue fabric stained with earth and worse. She fell once. Then again. The second time, she didn't rise right away. She lay there in the heat, cheek pressed to the ground, breathing in dust and trying to remember the sound of rain. It felt like a story someone else had told her. Once long ago, her mother had said the desert wasn't cruel, just honest. It gave nothing it didn't take first. Clara let her eyes close. Time passed. How much she didn't know. The shadows grew longer, stretching over her like fingers. Her lips moved, dry and silent. A prayer, maybe, or a goodbye. She thought of her sister, dead in childbirth, of her mother, gone in a winter fever back east, of the first time she sang in church, her voice trembling with hope. She thought of Eli's face when he smiled, and then when he didn't. The world narrowed to the sound of her breath, shallow and unsteady. And then, the horse did not gallop. Its hooves came soft, cautious. She felt them before she heard them, vibrations in the earth, small and rhythmic, like a lullaby played on a drumskin. Her heart tightened. Her fingers twitched toward the canteen. A shadow fell over her body. She tried to lift her head, but could not. Only her eyes moved, squinting upward through the lashes caked with sweat and salt. Not Eli. This man's silhouette was broad at the shoulders, quiet in the limbs. He dismounted without flourish, his bare feet making no sound against the cracked earth. Long hair dark and wind-matted, framed face she couldn't see clearly, only the stillness in it. A stillness like stone, like riverbed. He crouched beside her, one hand hovering in the air before it touched her forehead. His skin was coppered by the sun, his eyes a color she couldn't name. She flinched, expecting roughness. Instead, a water skin was pressed gently to her mouth. His other hand steadied her neck as the liquid touched her tongue, cool and earthy, like melted snow. He said nothing, not even in his expression. But in the hush that followed, Clara felt something shift, not in the land or the air, but in herself. This man did not see a woman broken and beaten. He did not look at her with pity or disgust. He simply saw her. That was almost worse. Almost too much. She wanted to speak, to thank him or ask who he was, but her voice caught somewhere behind her teeth. Her throat was raw, her body trembling like the last leaf before winter's snap. He didn't wait for her words. Instead, he lifted her, not with brute force, but with the care of someone who knows what it is to be carried when you cannot walk. Clara sagged against his chest. His heart beat slow and steady beneath her ear. The scent of leather, cedar, and dust clung to the skin. For the first time in days, maybe longer, she let herself be held. The wind sang around them, softer now. The sun had dipped below the hills, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. The desert, that cruel and sacred expanse, seemed to pause, to breathe. She closed her eyes. If death had come, it came with warm hands and silent steps. And maybe that was all anyone could ask for in the end. But something in her chest refused to quiet. A flicker, a spark. He began to walk, cradling her as if she were more than bones and bruises. She felt the sway of his stride, the firmness of his grip. Not a savior, no, not yet, but not a ghost either. As the darkness rose and the stars found their places, Clara let the silence fill her. And in that silence, something whispered, not words, not thoughts, but a feeling. You are not done yet. The wind, the earth, the sky, they all seemed to lean in closer, listening. And somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, she began to believe them. The hut was not large. It bent low beneath the weight of branches lashed together by careful hands, and the scent of earth and old smoke hung thick in the air. Shadows danced gently along the walls, painted by the trembling light of a small fire set in the center. Outside, the wind hissed softly, threading through the canyon stones like a sleeping serpent. Clara did not know where she was. She knew only the pain that hummed under her skin, less wild now, less screaming. Her ankle was wrapped in cloth that smelled of crushed sage and something sharper, something cool. The fever had broken. Her lips were no longer cracked open like desert clay, and the water she drank no longer tasted of death. But her body felt foreign. Every breath reminded her of the journey she had not chosen. She blinked slowly, the air hazy with smoke and light, and saw him again. He sat just beyond the edge of the firelight, still, carved from silence, his shoulders strong and unhurried, his movements deliberate. He whittled something, a piece of wood turning slowly into a shape beneath his blade. She watched his hands more than his face. They told her more. They worked with reverence, not pride. He was not creating to show her something. He was simply creating. She cleared her throat. The sound startled even her. He did not look up. She tried to sit and found herself breathing through her teeth, pain slicing sharp through her side. Her gasp brought his gaze to hers at last. His eyes were steady, dark, yes, but not the kind that swallowed. The kind that saw, that remembered. She felt small beneath them, but not weak. Just real. She opened her mouth again, unsure what she meant to say. Thank you, perhaps. Or who are you? But no words came. Instead, he stood and walked to her side with fluid quiet, placed a small clay bowl in her lap, and gestured toward it. It was stew. Simple, fragrant. Bits of wild root, maybe rabbit. She could not tell. But it was warm, and it filled the hollow places inside her that Eli had left behind. He spoke only once that day, after she'd eaten, when her eyes drifted closed and her body leaned into sleep like a boat tipping toward calm waters. She heard his voice, low, roughened by disuse. You are safe. Nothing more. Nothing less. When she woke again, it was morning. The canyon outside the hut was all red stone and golden light, tall and old and watching. She lay beneath a blanket woven in colors she could not name. Near the fire, the man knelt, tending a pot. The smell of wild mint and smoke touched the air. She watched him for a while before speaking. My name is Clara. He didn't turn, but his hand paused above the pot. A moment passed, then another. Finally, his voice, slow and cool as water over stones. Taza. She repeated it quietly. Taza. The name tasted ancient. That day, he helped her outside. The sun touched her skin like an old friend, gentler now, not something to fear. She leaned on a carved cane left by her bed, its surface marked with etched lines she couldn't decipher. He said nothing of the carving. He rarely spoke, but his silence was not empty. It was a space where her pain was not questioned, a place where her presence did not have to be explained or earned. She found herself filling the silence, not because he asked, but because she could. She spoke in pieces, like shedding skin, of the farm she left behind, of Eli's shifting moods, the way his love curdled into contempt. She spoke of the night he left her, though not all at once. Those words came last, and with difficulty, like stones being drawn from a well. Taza listened. He never interrupted, never offered judgment, just listened, head bowed slightly, as if her story deserved a place in the world, no matter how broken. In the evenings, they sat beside the fire. Sometimes he brought her herbs to grind, small tasks that made her feel useful. Sometimes they said nothing for hours. And once, when she woke from a dream with tears on her face, he left a small carving beside her bed. An owl, its wings curved inward. A protector. He had carved it from the cane she leaned on. The owl's eyes were deep knowing. Clara began to change without noticing. She combed her hair in the mornings, smoothed her dress with care. She stood longer each day. Her hands, once trembling, grew steadier. She laughed once, just a small sound caught between surprise and joy, and saw something flicker in Taza's face. Not a smile, but something softer. She asked about him carefully. He answered in fragments. He had a sister, once. She died at the hands of men who promised trade but brought rifles. He was not old enough to stop them. He carried her memory in the beads around his neck, the ones he had strung himself. He did not ask her to understand. He only told her what was true. Clara listened, as he had. Her silence was not the silence she gave Eli, one built from fear and shrinking, but a quiet that held space for another's pain. They did not speak of what lay beyond the canyon. Not yet. It was as though they had made a pact without words. Here, in this narrow fold of earth, they would exist apart from what hurt them. But pain does not stay buried forever. One day, while gathering kindling near the stream, Clara heard horses, distant, echoing off the stone. Taza heard them too. His body went still, eyes narrowing toward the sound. She watched him then, the way his hand moved to the small knife at his belt, the way he shifted his weight, not ready to fight, but ready to protect. Her breath caught in her chest. For her, that readiness. The riders passed without incident. Just settlers, likely, heading east. But something had changed. That night, Clara sat beside Taza beneath the canyon stars. The sky stretched wide above them, bursting with constellations that pulsed like quiet promises. She turned to him, her voice almost a whisper. I don't think I was meant to die out there. He did not respond at once. Then, softly, no. She looked at him, really looked. The scars on his hands, the line of his jaw, the way his presence did not press on her, but steadied her. You saved me, she said. His eyes met hers, unflinching. You weren't lost, just left. The words hit something inside her chest that hadn't been touched in years. She swallowed hard, unsure what to do with the warmth rising in her throat. She looked away, then back again. You don't have to carry me anymore. I never did, he said. The fire crackled beside them, sparks spinning into the dark. Clara turned her gaze skyward, where a shooting star cut a silver line across the heavens. Somewhere deep in her, something shifted. Not healed, not yet, but beginning. She did not know what tomorrow held. But she knew this. She was no longer afraid of her own shadow. And beside this man, in this quiet place, she felt seen, not for what had happened to her, but for who she still was. The canyon whispered around them, warm and old and full of breath. Clara leaned back and let it hold her. The light had changed. It was in the way the shadows stretched farther at dusk, how the wind no longer simply passed, but seemed to pause, as if listening. The canyon that once felt hidden now pulsed with a fragile awareness, like the breath before a question is asked. Clara noticed it first in the silence between her and Taza, not strained, but fuller, a silence that carried weight, like river stones cupped in gentle hands. Her ankle had healed enough to bear her weight, though she still leaned slightly on the carved cane. The owl's gaze at its top had worn smooth beneath her touch. Each day she walked farther, her steps more certain, her body a slow reclamation. And yet, unease moved within her like a bird caged too long. The world beyond the canyon had not vanished. It simply waited. One morning, while Taza repaired a bough near the fire, Clara sat threading old cloth into strips for bandages. The air smelled of juniper and ash. A traveler approached, a wiry man with a mule and cautious eyes, and Clara's body tensed before she even saw him fully. She hadn't seen a white man since Eli. Her fingers went cold. Taza stood before the man could speak. His presence, calm but immovable, softened the edge of the moment. The man offered trade, news, stories. Taza declined most, but Clara asked softly if he carried any letters from the nearest town, Clifton or maybe farther. The man nodded, dug into a pouch. Name? Clara Whitlow, she said, voice steady. He handed her a torn scrap, a page ripped from a broadsheet, no envelope, no sender. She unfolded it with careful hands. A headline: Clara Whitlow declared deceased. Husband remarries heiress of Prescott Ranch. There was a likeness of her face, poorly drawn, yet unmistakably her. The words bit like frost. Not grief, not anymore, but insult. Absence twisted into narrative. He'd buried her without a body, rewritten her into something convenient, tragic, and forgotten. Clara, the good wife who vanished in the wild, a ghost to absolve the man who betrayed her. She stared at the paper until her vision blurred. Taza said nothing. He didn't reach for her, didn't fill the air with platitudes. He let her feel it. Later, as they sat beneath the cottonwoods that clung to the streambed, Clara spoke without turning toward him. I need to see it for myself. His silence was an invitation, not refusal. I don't want revenge, she added, more to herself than him. I want to end it. On my feet. She looked at him then, and something passed between them. Not promise, not request. Just understanding. Within a day, they packed light, enough for the road, not the return. Clara wore a dress simple but clean, and a hat to shade her face. The owl cane rested beside her saddle. Taza rode close, silent as always. But his presence had grown into a comfort so natural she hardly remembered what it felt like to ride alone. The land stretched before them, the desert now a place of memory, not menace. Clifton came into view at sunset. A tired town, all creaking signs and dirt roads pressed flat by wagon wheels. It greeted them not with anger, but wariness. Two figures unfamiliar to each other and familiar to no one. The stairs did not surprise her. A woman thought dead and an Apache man walking side by side was not something people in such towns saw without flinching. She dismounted outside the general store. A girl sweeping the steps froze, her eyes widening. Clara gave her a gentle smile and walked past, her steps uneven but steady. Inside, she bought a comb. Nothing more. Then she asked quietly where she might find Eli Whitlow. The girl at the counter hesitated, eyes flicking to Taza. Then she nodded toward the saloon down the street. He's there most afternoons. Keeps company with the Prescott girl. Talks real proud. Clara walked there on her own. Taza did not follow, but waited in the shade across the street. She didn't need protection. Not here. Not anymore. The saloon smelled of sour beer and overcooked meat. Eli sat at a corner table, boots up, glass in hand, laughing at something half-heard. His hair was longer, his shirt cleaner, but his voice was the same, slick with charm and rust underneath. She stepped inside and stood still until he looked up. He paled. It was the only satisfaction she let herself have. "Clara," he said, half-risen. She did not respond with her name. She took 3 steps forward, came clicking against the wood. "You left me for dead," she said softly. The saloon quieted. He opened his mouth, closed it again. The bottle in his hand trembled slightly. "I thought you didn't care whether I lived or died," she interrupted, her voice even. "You cared that I was inconvenient. You traded me for silence and land." He stood now, face flushed with something between shame and fear. He reached for her arm. She stepped back. "You don't get to touch me," she said. The silence in the room grew heavier. Eli's new wife, a young woman in a dress too fine for the town, watched with wide, wary eyes. Clara turned to her, not with malice, but clarity. "You'll see it too one day. That kind of man doesn't change. He just learns new lies." And then she turned and walked out. The sky was darkening, the air cooler. Taza met her at the corner without question, and they walked back to their horses without a word. She didn't look back. Not once. That night, by their small fire just beyond the town's reach, Clara sat cross-legged on her blanket, arms around her knees. She was quiet a long time. Then she said, "It didn't give me what I thought it would." "What did you think it would give?" Taza asked. "I don't know. Closure. Something clean." She shook her head. "But it just feels finished. Not better. Just over." Taza looked at her, his face in profile, firelight dancing in the lines near his eyes. "That's the thing about shadows," he said. "You don't kill them. You just stop walking backward." Clara let the words settle into her bones. She turned to him then, not with need, but with knowing. "You don't speak much. But when you do, it's always true." He met her gaze. And in that look, unspoken and whole, she saw something deeper than comfort. Not attraction. Not desire. Not yet. Respect. She reached for his hand. Not with ceremony, not with tremble. Just a hand finding another hand in the dark. He did not pull away. And in that quiet, beneath stars no town could dim, Clara realized she wasn't someone who needed to be saved anymore. She was someone choosing. The fire cracked beside them, steady and warm. The shadows behind her grew distant. And, in their place, the first flicker of something waiting. Not loud, not demanding, but real. Tomorrow could wait. Tonight, she was whole. The desert smelled of ash and rain. Not the rain that fell, but the kind that promised, far off, stitched into the clouds like silver thread. The sky above the canyon had turned the color of old bruises, streaked with light that didn't soften. Clara felt it on her skin before she saw it. The press of something coming, not quite danger yet, but close. Like a page turning just before the truth is revealed. They had returned to the canyon days ago, back to the quiet that once felt untouched. But quiet, she had learned, could carry echoes. And echoes carried names. The girl from the Clifton store had sent word, guilt laced with admiration. She had overheard Eli speaking of unfinished business, his voice bitter with embarrassment, loud with anger that had nowhere to go. A man like him didn't tolerate being made a fool of, especially not by a woman who had risen from the dead and dared to speak without permission. He had gathered men, writers, the kind that didn't ask too many questions. And they were heading west, toward where he thought she might have gone. He spoke of witchcraft, betrayal, collusion with savages. He needed a story more than he needed revenge. Taza listened as she relayed the message. His expression did not change. His hands remained still, though one rested near the edge of his knife. "We can run," she said, though she already knew the answer. He looked at her with that calm depth she had come to know, then shook his head once. "No, not again." She breathed in deeply. The canyon wind moved around her like a second spine. She remembered lying half dead in its belly, broken and small. And now, standing in the same place, Her voice no longer shook. I won't run either. Taza's eyes searched hers, not with doubt, but with reverence. The night before they came, she slept lightly, her dreams half-formed and hovering. In the dark, she traced the owl carved into her cane, the one he had given her when she could barely stand. Its eyes, though wooden, never looked away. When the morning came, it came without apology. The first rider appeared just before noon, silhouetted against the ridgeline. Then another. 4 or 5. Eli last. His horse better fed than the rest. He sat tall in the saddle, dressed like a man used to admiration, not dust. Clara and Taza stood on the rise above their home. No weapons drawn, just presence. Wind in their hair, earth beneath their feet, and history rising like smoke behind their eyes. Eli didn't speak at first. He let the image of himself framed by riders say what he wanted said. He dismounted with a flourish, the others staying behind like shadows with triggers. He stepped forward, just enough to be heard, not touched. I came for justice. Clara said nothing. Taza remained unmoved beside her. You poisoned my name. You spat on our marriage. Ran off with this, he gestured toward Taza, his voice thickening. This savage. Do you know what people are saying about me? Clara's jaw tightened, but her tone was calm, flat like stone. You left me for dead. Eli laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that cracked the stillness. I left you because you were weak. And now you want to stand here like some kind of prophet in dirt robes, thinking you're better than me? I don't think I'm better, she said. I know I'm alive. That's more than you ever let me be. He stepped closer, and one of the men behind him twitched, his hand ghosting near the rifle at his hip. I should have put you in the ground that day, Eli said, low and venomous. Would have saved me the embarrassment. Clara didn't flinch. She took one step forward. You already buried me. What you didn't expect is that something would grow. Taza didn't speak, but his presence pulsed beside her like a heartbeat. He had taught her this, the strength of stillness, the power in refusing to shrink. Eli's hand moved fast, too fast for thought. The pistol came free from his belt in a blur. Taza shifted forward, but Clara was faster. She stepped between them, her voice cut through the canyon like a blade. No more. The words stopped him, stopped the men behind him, stopped even the wind. Go ahead, she said. Shoot me. Finish what you started. Prove to everyone that the only way you can silence a woman is with blood. Her eyes held him, steady, clean. Eli hesitated. For the first time, his hands weren't sure. His jaw tightened. Sweat bloomed at his temple. You're nothing, he said, more to himself than her. You were always nothing. Clara took one more step, close enough that he could see the scar on her cheek, the strength in her spine. I was never nothing, she said. You just couldn't see anything you didn't own. Eli's hand dropped, not by choice, but by defeat. His shoulders sagged. A man who had never faced the mirror of what he was. He turned to the others, but they did not lift their rifles. They looked at Clara, then at Taza, then at Eli again, and they stayed still. Men like Eli needed an audience. And now even that was gone. Without another word, he mounted his horse. His face was pale with something like fear and something worse, insignificance. They rode off. No gunfire, no glory, just the sound of hooves retreating and dust breaking in the wind. Clara stood long after they disappeared. Her breath came slow. Taza stepped beside her, not touching, just near. As always, she turned to him, and for the first time since her healing began, her smile was not small or cautious. It was full, like something reclaimed. I didn't need to kill him, she said, softly. Just had to stop being afraid. Taza nodded. He looked out over the land, the ridge, the place where Eli had disappeared. Then back to her. You're free now. Clara shook her head gently. No. I was free the moment I stopped waiting for him to see me. The sun dipped lower, casting light that turned their shadows long and golden. That evening, they built a fire not out of necessity, but celebration. The flames danced high, orange and alive. Clara sat close, the warmth painting her skin. Taza added cedarwood, the smoke fragrant and bright. They didn't speak of what had passed. The silence was no longer heavy. It hummed with the presence of two souls no longer hiding. Clara watched the sparks rise, each one lifting like a memory, released. Her hand found his. No declaration, no urgency, just fingers meeting in the space between them, where pain had once lived and something truer now began. Love, when it came, didn't rush. It didn't demand or conquer. It arrived like the fire, quiet at first, then steady. Something earned. She leaned her head to his shoulder, and the night, once feared, became a sky full of light. Far off, thunder rolled, soft and slow. But it brought no fear, just the promise of something new. Clara closed her eyes. She had survived the man who buried her. She had chosen the one who saw her rise. And in that rise, she found not just life again. She found herself.